This is not an invitation. It's a warning. What you're about to hear does not make people stronger. It makes them heavier. And most men collapse under that kind of weight. They try to wear it like armor, imitate it like a pose, perform it like a mask. They don't realize this mindset is not something you adopt. It's something that reveals itself over time, often when life has stripped everything unnecessary away. If you are looking for confidence, dominance, or a way to feel superior, this will not serve you. This way of being corrodes fragile egos. It destabilizes social systems that rely on noise, reassurance, and constant emotional signaling. People who need movement to feel alive find stillness threatening. People who survive on reaction feel endangered by restraint. The glacier mindset is dangerous when misunderstood because it does not announce itself as power. It does not posture. It does not explain. It does not correct perceptions. It simply exists. And that existence alone bends the environment around it. Most people cannot tolerate that. They mistake silence for judgment, calm for superiority, stillness for concealed hostility. When you do not rush to clarify yourself, others rush to define you. When you do not react, they project. When you do not seek approval, they search for leverage. This is where the danger begins. Not because the man with a glacier mindset seeks control, but because unstable systems cannot function around something that does not move when pushed. Every hierarchy, every group dynamic, every fragile alliance depends on predictable reactions. Laughter at the right moments. Outrage at the expected provocations. Anxiety when pressure is applied. A man who does not comply with these rhythms is seen as a threat, even if he does nothing at all. You may already know this sensation. Conversations subtly reorient when you enter the room. People explain themselves longer than necessary. Jokes are followed by clarifications. Hostility is disguised as curiosity. Respect arrives mixed with resentment, and you're never quite sure why. You didn't demand it. You didn't cultivate it. You didn't even notice when it started. That's because this mindset is not built outwardly. It forms internally, under compression. It emerges after long exposure to disappointment, to betrayal, to noise that never delivered substance. It develops when you learn that most words are currency, and most people are perpetually overdrawn. So you reduce movement. You reduce expression. You reduce emotional surface area. Not to manipulate, not to intimidate, but because unnecessary motion wastes energy, and energy is finite. This is why the glacier mindset is not aspirational. It is consequential. It appears after restraint becomes default, after patience stops being an effort and becomes a condition, after you realize that explaining yourself has never improved outcomes, only prolonged friction. And here is what unsettles people most. You are not trying to be unreadable. You simply stopped narrating yourself for their comfort. That absence is louder than any declaration. Entire personalities are built around being seen, validated, echoed. When that feedback loop disappears, anxiety fills the vacuum. People lean in. They test boundaries. They provoke reactions. They attempt to extract information from your stillness. And the more nothing happens, the more destabilized they become. This is why this mindset is not safe in the hands of someone who wants attention. It isolates by default. It creates distance without intention. It attracts projection, admiration, suspicion, and hostility in equal measure. You will not be celebrated for this. You will be tolerated, speculated about, quietly measured. Some will orbit you. Others will attempt to undermine you preemptively. Very few will understand that none of it was engineered. It was simply the byproduct of mass. If any of this feels uncomfortably familiar, understand this clearly. You are not broken, antisocial, or emotionally deficient. But you are operating on a frequency that most people are unequipped to interpret. And once that happens, the rules change, whether you consent to it or not. If this resonates, you were never meant to be loud. You were meant to be inevitable. Power does not begin with action. That is the illusion taught to restless men. True power begins with mass, and mass does not hurry. Stillness terrifies unstable systems because it cannot be negotiated with. Movement can be redirected. Emotion can be manipulated. Reaction can be provoked. But something that does not respond on cue forces the system to confront itself. Every push is met with silence. Every attempt to create momentum collapses under its own effort. This is why reactive people mistake movement for strength. They believe noise equals influence. They believe expression equals presence. They believe urgency equals importance. But urgency is often the signal of weakness, the need to act before someone notices the lack of substance beneath the motion. Immovable people do not share this anxiety, not because they are superior, but because they are anchored. Their identity is not assembled in real time through feedback. It was forged privately, under pressure, when no audience was present to applaud or correct them. Think of ice. Ice does not expand to fill a space through force. It occupies territory by density. It applies pressure slowly, invisibly, until structures crack without ever hearing a sound. Entire landscapes are carved not by impact, but by persistence. No argument, no announcement, just time multiplied by mass. The Glacier Mindset operates the same way. It does not chase outcomes. Chasing implies dependence. It does not argue positions. Argument implies uncertainty. It does not explain motives. Explanation invites negotiation. Instead, it reduces variables. It simplifies inputs. It allows others to exhaust themselves trying to move something that was never designed to respond. This is why silence is so often misinterpreted as strategy. People assume restraint must be calculated, that quiet must be concealing intent. In reality, it is often the opposite. It is the absence of intent toward others entirely. The mind has turned inward, away from performance, away from persuasion, away from the endless maintenance of image. There is an old logic understood by those who studied power without sentiment. Influence is greatest where visibility is lowest. The more something insists on being seen, the more it reveals its dependence on being acknowledged. The less something moves, the more gravity it exerts. Gravity does not convince. It does not threaten. It does not speak. It simply makes resistance costly. This is what unsettles people who live reactively. Their entire sense of control depends on provoking response. If they can make you angry, defensive, excited, offended, they can predict you. Prediction creates leverage. Leverage creates safety. But an immovable man offers none of this. He does not provide emotional handles. He does not escalate when challenged. He does not deflate when ignored. His internal temperature remains constant regardless of external weather. Over time, this constancy rewires the environment. Conversations slow down around him. Conflicts lose energy. Manipulation attempts become awkward, then transparent, then abandoned. People either rise to his level of composure or quietly remove themselves from proximity. Not because he forces them to, but because systems reorganize themselves around what they cannot move. This mindset reshapes reality quietly, not visibly. There is no dramatic turning point, no public display of dominance, no confrontation that signals change. Instead, outcomes simply arrive. Decisions go his way without debate. Opposition dissipates without explanation. Doors open without being knocked on. And when asked how it happened, there is no story to tell. That is the philosophical foundation most men never understand. They believe power is something you do. They believe influence is something you perform. They believe respect is something you demand or earn publicly. The Glacier Mindset understands something colder. Power is something you become, and once you reach sufficient mass, the world adjusts accordingly. The signs are not achievements. They are side effects. None of them feel impressive from the inside. In fact, most of them feel like quiet distortions. Moments where you realize the world is responding to you in ways you never requested. The first sign is the way silence follows you. Not awkward silence, not empty pauses, a dense quiet that settles after you speak, or when you choose not to. People begin to fill that space for you. They explain, justify, clarify, sometimes contradict themselves mid-sentence. You are not interrogating them. You are not judging them. But your lack of urgency removes their footing. Without reaction to orient themselves against, they start revealing more than intended. The second sign is emotional temperature control that no longer feels like control at all. Anger doesn't rise quickly. Excitement doesn't spike. Disappointment doesn't demand expression. It's not suppression. It's irrelevance. Emotional escalation simply stopped feeling useful. Others may interpret this as coldness, arrogance, or emotional distance, but internally it feels neutral, like weather passing over stone. The unsettling part is realizing how dependent most people are on emotional contagion, and how disarmed they feel when it doesn't work on you. The third sign is being misunderstood in ways that no explanation seems to fix. Detachment is mistaken for superiority. Focus is mistaken for judgment. Restraint is mistaken for concealed aggression. You notice that the more you attempt to clarify your intentions, the worse the misunderstanding becomes. So you stop. And strangely, the misunderstanding remains, but the need to correct it disappears. You realize that perception is not something you can manage without surrendering leverage, and some distortions are less costly than engagement. The fourth sign is the destabilizing effect of your absence. When you withdraw from a group, a conversation, a dynamic, things don't continue as expected. Momentum stalls. Decisions linger. Tensions surface that were previously hidden. You were not leading overtly. You were not directing outcomes. Yet your presence was anchoring something. This is when you understand that influence does not always look like action. Sometimes it looks like weight quietly removed from a structure that was relying on it. The fifth sign is patience that outlasts manipulation. Time pressure stops working on you. Ultimatums lose their edge. Delays no longer feel like threats. You are willing to wait past the point where others reveal their hand. This unnerves people who rely on urgency to force compliance. They begin to overplay strategies, expose motives, rush conclusions. From the inside, this patience doesn't feel virtuous. It feels inevitable, like there is nowhere you need to be emotionally. The sixth sign is the way conflict avoids you without resolution. Disputes dissolve instead of exploding. People choose not to challenge you directly, even when disagreement is present. It's not fear. It's cost assessment. They sense that escalation will not produce the reaction they're seeking. Without emotional payoff, confrontation loses purpose. You don't win arguments. You simply never enter them. And somehow, the outcome still lands in your favor. The seventh sign is isolation that grows without loneliness. Your circle narrows. Interactions become fewer but heavier. Small talk becomes exhausting. You notice that many connections were sustained entirely by noise, shared complaints, or mutual reassurance. When you stop contributing to that economy, those relationships quietly dissolve. What remains is sparse, but solid. And you recognize that this narrowing was not a choice. It was a consequence of becoming immovable. Each of these signs carries a cost. They separate you from the familiar rhythms of social life. They make you harder to read, harder to engage, harder to manipulate. But they also make you harder to connect with superficially. This is why the Glacier Mindset is often mistaken for emotional withdrawal or arrogance. In reality, it is a refusal to expend energy where it produces no return, and a willingness to let systems collapse that cannot survive without constant input. If you recognize yourself here, understand this. None of these signs make you exceptional. They make you incompatible with instability. And incompatibility has consequences. This mindset is not a reward. It is a burden that arrives quietly and never asks permission. The first consequence is isolation. Not dramatic, not sudden, but cumulative. You will not be excluded. You will be bypassed. People will stop inviting you into chaos they cannot feed you with. Conversations will happen without you, not out of disrespect, but because your presence changes the temperature. You make things slower, heavier, more real. And most environments are built to avoid that. You will feel this most acutely when you realize how many relationships were sustained by mutual volatility, by shared outrage, by emotional trade. When you remove your participation from that economy, it collapses. Not because you withdrew affection, but because you withdrew reaction. And not everyone survives that. Some men discover this mindset and immediately weaponize it. They attempt to perform stillness, imitate silence, posture detachment. They believe restraint is an aesthetic. They believe calm is dominance. They believe distance is power. These men fail quickly, because without internal mass, stillness is empty, and emptiness invites provocation. Their silence cracks under pressure. Their detachment curdles into bitterness. Their patience reveals itself as indecision. The glacier mindset cannot be faked because it is not behavioral. It is structural. It forms when ego has been compressed enough that it no longer requires constant reinforcement. When validation loses value. When control over self becomes more important than influence over others. And this is where the warning becomes necessary. If you possess this mindset, you must understand that it is not neutral. Your presence will alter rooms. Your absence will expose fault lines. Your restraint will be interpreted as judgment whether you intend it or not. People will project narratives onto you simply to regain equilibrium. You do not get to choose whether this happens. You only get to choose whether you carry it responsibly. This is not a path toward admiration. In fact, admiration becomes irrelevant. You will not be loudly celebrated. You will be quietly accounted for. Decisions will be made with you in mind, even when you are not present. Resistance will appear indirect. Respect will arrive without warmth. And if you are careless, you will become something you never intended, a silent source of pressure that fractures weaker structures simply by existing near them. This is why this mindset is not for validation, dominance, or ego. Those motivations poison it. They reintroduce hunger. And hunger makes men loud, reactive, and predictable again. Understand this clearly. Mass changes landscapes whether it intends to or not. A glacier does not seek conquest. It does not negotiate with terrain. It does not even notice what it reshapes. It simply moves, slowly, silently, and the world rearranges itself in response. Ice does not announce itself. It simply arrives, and the ocean rearranges.